Hey guys, welcome to another movie review, and probably my first movie review of 2025. Also, for those who are kind of keeping track of that, I'm going to start with a new Mel Gibson movie that came out here in January of 2025, and that's the film Flight Risk. This is a film that my dad wanted me to go with him to go see, and surely enough, it was my first 2025 film experience. Also, so let's talk about Flight Risk for you guys today. So in this film, if you don't know anything about it, basically Michelle Dockery from Downtown Abbey and Here and a bunch of other things that she's been a part of. She's basically this law enforcement official that is out to capture this character that's played by Topher Grace from that '70s show fame. And while he's being captured, they're trying to get a flight back to basically where I'm assuming his court case is going to be. And there's this really weird pilot that's played by Mark Wahlberg that's claiming that he's going to fly them to their destination. And things don't seem right on this flight while, this prisoner and the Michelle Dockery character are aboard it. Um, the ID picture that's supposed to be the pilot that they're supposed to have doesn't match Mark Wahlberg's face and stuff like that. So there's things like that that um, kind of give everybody pause on this plane at first. And over the course of this film, we find out, what exactly this Mark Wahlberg character is capable of. How did he get on there? What did he have to do to basically become their pilot for the day, or to go back to this court case? Michelle Dockery and Topher Grace now have to survive this, and obviously Topher Grace is in handcuffs because he's this convicted felon that's being captured, and so they have to survive this, really long flight back home with this really crazy guy that somehow became their pilot for their flight back home. But overall, guys, I thought Flight Risk was an okay film. It's January's not the greatest track record for good releases, and so even I myself was a little surprised that I got around to seeing this one. Remember seeing trailers for it, back when I saw some other films throughout 2024. This one didn't particularly strike me as interesting, but when one of your parents wants to go out to see a movie with you, and it's the discount $6 Tuesday and stuff like that. This is the one we ended up choosing because there really wasn't a lot of other great choices. And I've already done my best of 2024 list, so there really wasn't any point of tracking down additional 2024 titles. But overall, I thought this film was okay. It's one of those films where I'm not offended by it, but I'm not super impressed by it either. It's one of those films where you'll get what you paid for, but at the same time, you won't get anything additional to the film experience that you just dropped whatever $6 for, or whatever you paid for to see the film. But for my positives and negatives of Flight Risk, why I think it's not terrible but not great. For my positives of it that I can praise it for with compliments. I thought Mark Wahlberg's redneck character was really interesting. He really did shave part of his head to play this character. Definitely he definitely embraced the whole Tennessee twang with his voice. He definitely had that weird hillbilly voice. And there was always something about him throughout the film that always makes you wonder, who he is. So I thought that aspect of his character was fun, and you could definitely tell he was having a ball playing this redneck character. I also thought Topher Grace's character was pretty interesting too. He has a lot of humor to his character. He also kind of had this little redemptive arc throughout the film that you almost kind of want to cheer for him for, because he is trying to clean up his life. We find him at this bad place at the beginning of the film, and by the time we get him on this plane and we want to see him kind of clean up his life, and he knows that there's something wrong with this Mark Wahlberg character, we really want to kind of cheer for him. I feel like we're given just enough reasons to make sure that he lives through this scenario and wants to clean up his life and help out Michelle Dockery, land the plane successfully and make sure that everybody lives. So there's a lot of aspects of his character that was very redemptive to me, and I thought was very admirable. So I really liked how his character was written in this film as well. I also like how the film makes the most out of a limited cast. There really isn't a lot of characters in this film, maybe 8 or 9 at tops. And the film really does make good use of all these characters that there really isn't a lot of. Even when you see the cast during the end credits, there's probably only like 8 or 9 characters listed, if even that. And I really liked how they really kind of made the most of that cast. Usually with films like this, characters go from place to place. In this film, they're mostly on this plane for most of the time. And for being a 90-minute movie, I thought they made the most of having a limited cast. Make sure everybody, make sure that their minutes were worthwhile, and that they made the most of the cast that they had here. I also like how the film builds suspense and tension really well. Mel Gibson directed this film, which really isn't a film that would necessarily scream Mel Gibson while you're watching it. But I thought the suspension and tension was well built. There's just enough going on here where we have just enough things that we're guessing about of who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, why Mark Wahlberg's character is doing all this and stuff like that. So I thought the suspension and the tension were very well handled here, and nothing life changing or anything like that, but just enough where I could compliment it for building on the tension in a successful way. There's this character throughout the film, and there's a lot of fun. We actually do get to see him in person near the end of the film too, which I thought was pretty cool. He's this character that's trying to help Michelle Dockery fly this plane because her character's never flown a plane before. And even just like how he hits on her and stuff like that, and how there's this ongoing joke about how they're going to meet up for drinks later that day if she lands the plane successfully. Really fun character. I know some people online were already picking on him for sounding like Apu from The Simpsons, and being a big Simpsons fan, I know exactly where they're coming from, but at the same time, you got to make the characters fun, and if you're going to go the Apu route, I think that's totally fine. They definitely serve the purpose of what the character was trying to do. Definitely a fun character, mostly a voiceover character. You don't really get to see him in person for very long. But for whenever he does show up in the film, helping Michelle Dockery over the phone, very fun character that shows up here throughout the movie. I also thought, too, for the most part, the film was pretty well directed. Like I said, Mel Gibson directed this. He didn't really add his kind of personal stamp on anything. It didn't really feel super violent. It didn't feel like something out of Lethal Weapon. It didn't feel like something out of Braveheart or anything like that. But for the most part, it was well directed. I'm sure it was just a quick little paycheck movie for him. So it would have been cool if he added something additional, had his own little flavor to it. But for the most part, it is well directed. It's competently made, and it doesn't really feel boring at all. But for my negatives of Flight Risk, there are unfortunately a lot of scenes that do lack believability and credibility. There's just a lot of moments like, planes going through snow mountains and not having any kind of damage done, not making the plane crash or anything. There's just a lot of really hokey moments like that that really kind of drag the film down a little bit for me. It almost feels like, these characters feel invincible and that this really old plane can somehow survive these really critical conditions and stuff. So certain moments like that took me out of the film a little bit. I thought those moments in particular could have been better. I also thought for the most part the film kind of ran out of things to do while everybody was on board this plane. There's even a moment where Mark Wahlberg's character just starts singing in random, and the scene kind of goes on for quite a while. And that was just evidence to me that they kind of ran out of things to do while these characters are aboard this plane. Now that we covered Topher Grace, now that we covered Michelle Dockery, now that we've covered Mark Wahlberg and kind of his revealing, the film kind of runs out of things to do at one point. And because it wants to stay in the air for as long as it does, you can definitely tell it was kind of running out of things to do. So that aspect of the film was a little disappointing to me. I thought they could have done better in the screenplay department of more things they could have done with things on the plane that could have kept things interesting for a while. I also thought the third act felt a little unfinished, and what I mean by that is there's this side plot introduced with Michelle Dockery really late in the movie about these people that she works with that are in trouble, that had some financial stuff that was kind of under the table that they're in trouble for, and they just touch on it for a little bit. And they touch on it for a little bit at the very end, but they don't really close it out. They don't really, there's this character she takes out, I guess, that kind of makes us draw our own conclusions. But that subplot in particular was never really finished. It just kind of ends. They just kind of have closed it out just enough where I guess it's the end, but at the same time, it's just one of those things where it just felt kind of unfinished to me, and that aspect was disappointing because by the time the credits roll, the film doesn't really feel finished. I also thought more time on the ground felt necessary because I do like a lot of the scenes, particularly at the beginning and the end of the film, where a lot of the film is on the ground and not on the plane yet. Where it is a lot of fun, we get to kind of see, Topher Grace's character embrace his humorous side a little bit more. And like I said, we get to see kind of that womanizer character in person and stuff like that. But I thought more time on the ground did feel necessary, specifically with that whole espionage subplot that we're introduced to really late in the film. So I thought more time on the ground felt needed to kind of flesh out the story in ways that it needed to. But overall, I'm going to give Flight Risk a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's okay. I think it's decent. I can kind of see why it's in January. There's nothing super special about it. It's not, a great Mel Gibson film or anything like that. There's just enough negatives here where you don't necessarily have to go out to a theater to see this one. If you want to wait for streaming for this, I think that's totally fine. Totally fine, rainy day streaming kind of a film. Not awful, not great, just kind of right in the middle for me. I would just say wait for streaming or wait for a way to rent this one, not necessarily have to go see it in a theater. So 7.5 out of 10 for me. Flight Risk is an okay film.